All right, good afternoon on a very hot sunny day. Thanks for traveling all the way. So we're on part 4 of this series on personal transformation, and we're exploring various aspects of inner transformation that we can bring about by ourselves by following very simple processes that are based on various psychological theories, including NLP, including a lot of inner family systems work, and a whole lot of other theories and philosophies. So the base of this entire series is the whole Freudian idea of the fact that the human persona is like an iceberg, and that there's only a tip of us which is visible to the society in general, and there's a large part of us which is under the water level, so to say, and it can only be accessed through deep inner work by ourselves. Sometimes it's not even accessible to us very easily, because we very often deal with ourselves as we deal with the world at the tip of the iceberg. So it takes a while to, in a way, bring down the waterline and expose ourselves to ourselves, right? So that remains the foundation of the series, and we continue to work with the idea of how do we access the deeper parts of the iceberg so as to be able to bring about transformations. So one of the things we spoke about was the idea of being able to access and enable transformation through the concept of frames, the fact that we all hold frames. We look at the world through a certain window, and if we shift the frame, we drop the window, our worldview shifts. Right? The last time we spoke about how do we shift stances using very tangible mechanisms of the body, our emotions and our language. Now these are things that we can watch fairly easily. Frames can be slightly more difficult to access, but body is easy to access. Not that we've been taught to access it well, but if we are a little mindful, we know what's happening to our body at any point in time. We can also access our emotion, and we can also listen to our own language, inner language and outer language, and be able to start shifting things through these 3 specific mechanisms. Today we're going to be exploring the idea of life sentences, and life sentences as a clue and a basis to trigger transformation for ourselves. Right? So what do we mean by life sentences? Typically, of course, we hear the term life sentence in the context of a person being jailed and yes, but very often we live in this. We create this for ourselves.
It's created by us, or it might be created by parents, or might be created
yes.
by teachers.
Yes.
It might be created by the society.
Very much.
Because they declare you are useless.
Yes.
And that thought goes on in them.
Yes. And we chose to hold on to that thought, and that's what creates the cage, right? So yes, as you rightly said, a lot of life sentences can be created by ourselves, not knowingly, but very often unknowingly, and therefore we say that usually it is created in the unconscious of the child. Right? Most of our life sentences are created when we are children. Right? Some of them, of course, can be built up as we become adults, but a lot of it is created as we are a child, and we hold on to it without quite knowing what it is. And a lot of times we also resign to these life sentences by saying, that's just who I am, that's just my personality, there's nothing I can do about it, right? So there is a sense of resignation that often accompanies the whole idea of life sentences. So what do we mean by it is, ultimately life sentences are judgments which can very often seem like belief statements, okay? And sometimes we make it about ourselves, sometimes others make those statements about us, our parents, teachers, guardians, any of them. And very often when we imbibe them as life sentences and therefore create that cage around us, we put that limitation around us saying that this is who I am and therefore this is my radius of operation. Right? That's the cage. So when we do that, when we imbibe and incorporate the life sentence into our personality, it's usually in a moment of stress or in a moment of vulnerability where we believe that there's no other truth, there's no other way of thinking about ourselves, right? And therefore, it is in a state of powerlessness that we often imbibe these life sentences. And usually they are, of course, in the unconscious, because if it's in the conscious, it is easy to drop it also. It's not, it becomes a life sentence only because it's in the unconscious. Yeah, it gets pushed down our iceberg, and then we seem to behave in a certain way, but we don't quite connect it back to the life sentence, right? And trouble with life sentences is, as the term says, it is a sentence, right? We're sentenced to life, to live in a certain way. So typically, and we have a whole lot of life sentences, all of us. Typical ones that we often hear is, I'm not good enough, right? I'll never be like him, her, right? I mean, usually comes from our comparison. Parents often make comparisons with a neighbor's child or with a classmate and say, you're not as bright as him, you're not as, sporty as him, not as good as him, good for nothing, yeah. So those are typical life sentences. You'll never learn, you're stupid, yeah. Right? You make me miserable, right? A whole lot of those. We also typically, all of us also hold certain, what we might term philosophical statements, which become life sentences. Life is difficult, life is not hard, life is not fair, money doesn't grow on trees. Yeah, those are very general philosophical life statements. We could also have emotional life statements about nobody likes me, I don't belong here. Right? A lot of children grow up with that when they have conflicting adults in the family, and then they're not too sure what's happening. They start feeling guilty about the conflict in their environment, whereas the child actually doesn't have anything to do with it. But in the process, the child imbibes the statement that maybe I'm the problem causer, maybe I'm guilty, or maybe I don't belong here. And we have those very dangerous life statements which sound really good, right? I'm a good girl, I'm a good boy, which sound nice, but come to think of it, it is a life sentence because it doesn't allow us to operate in any other way than in that periphery, in that cage.
Because of not taking steps.
Yes, because, yeah, and steps which may be necessary.
Do something, really, I might, fear of failure will be there.
Yes.
That I might not be good enough. People will think I'm not good enough at that job.
One is, yes, it can instigate a fear of failure. Second, yes, very often it triggers us to get into abusive relationships and stay in them. Because I'm a good girl, I can't walk out.
Yes.
Right? So, and we hear that in a lot of cases where people are into either substance abuse or into abusive relationships, very often there is a life statement that is very similar to that, which says, if I happen to leave this marriage where there is domestic violence, abuse, all of that, my parents will be not happy with me and I will become a bad girl, and because I'm a good girl, I have to stay here and suffer. Right? Or a lot of times we may want to, at the situation calls for retaliation against a person, an environment, a situation, and the good girl, good boy tag doesn't allow us to retaliate. It makes us take in and be a doormat. Yes. Right? So in that big, so therefore in essence, the good girl, good boy life sentence is a cage, and the good girl, good boy tag comes with a series of rules around it. What makes me a good girl? I'll be a good girl if I don't talk against anybody. I'll be a good girl if I listen to my parents. I will be a good girl if I always respect a particular person. There's a lot of rules and regulations which make one good, and that can be dangerous, right? Because end of the day, that's not my only identity. I need to be able to not be good if necessary. And the life sentence doesn't allow us the freedom to do that. So, and those are life sentences which can be extremely dangerous as well. The others are at least a little visible and can be worked with at some point.
These
but
are more found where parents use that reward technique.
Yes.
I mean, if you behave this way, I will give you this.
Yes. Yes.
That way that built up.
Yeah. You will see this.
Even random comments. Whether by the teacher, whether by the parent, whether by the friend.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Maybe
this
a shopkeeper also.
Yeah.
Correct.
And in that moment of vulnerability, we accept it. Yes. Because a large part of my work is in the corporate space, I hear a lot of these dangerous kind of life sentences which say something like, I always come first, I'm an achiever, which is again a life sentence, because somewhere perhaps parents, teachers have ingrained it in this child that in order to be a winner, in order to be successful, you have to come first, you have to achieve, you have to be the best. And in the process, even as professionals, these people carry on that life sentence, and therefore they get extremely stressed. They take on things way beyond they can handle, and they can't refuse tasks because they believe that's the only way to achieve, that's the only way to succeed. So these life sentences then become extremely unproductive and limiting, because the balance of life completely goes away because of that. At some point you become a slave to the life sentence, even if it's seemingly positive. It can enable a lot of productivity, but only to a certain extent. After that point, it loses balance. Right? So all of us live with a whole lot of these sentences, some of which are easily accessible when we start realizing there is a block in certain aspects of our lives, where when we find a certain relationship difficult, or we feel limited in a certain arena, that's when we start realizing that there's a belief around it, there's a statement around it which is causing that limitation, and then we can start working with them. Some of them perhaps are easier detected by people around us rather than ourselves.
And the difficulty with such kind of people, they will not see the big picture. Because I have seen in some corporate, VP, or GM, they are so particular that you should be on time.
Yes.
But then whatever, after that, whatever you do, it is different thing. But
Yes.
even if a person comes late, and he is good in his work.
Yes.
So it is acceptable sometimes.
Yes.
And not always,
Yeah.
but they will be very particular.
Yeah, because
that you should be on time.
any life sentence will make you rigid in that arena, right? Because this is the only way it can be. Right? So if I'm a good girl, I can only be a good girl. I can't be anything else. So it brings in its own rigidity in any way. Right? So there are multiple ways to access life sentences if you want to actively work at it. One way is to simply sit back and think about what are your operating beliefs, right? How is it that you approach life? How do you approach people? And through that, the life sentences then start emerging. Another way is to look at areas of life that you're unhappy with, you feel stuck in, and then look at what is causing that stuckness, what kind of a statement inside is causing the stuckness. And life statement could be about me, it could also be about another, it could also be about life in general. Right? As we said, it could be about saying all men are bad, I need to be safe from all men. That's a life statement. Right? It could be about a community or a religion, that becomes a life statement. It could be about money, it could be about health. There's several areas in which life statements can occur, but they're largely to do with my relationship with it. Right? So we can look at various ways of exploring it, look at stuckness in life and then come through the life statement, simply sit back, look at.
Questionnaire available where you yourself for examination of self in various areas, like your career, your marriage, your relationship. So you are asked this question to self and dig out your beliefs.
Yeah. There is not directly so much a life statement thing, but if you look at Carol Dweck's work around mindset, she has a mindset questionnaire which can actually be Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. So she speaks about mindsets, and a lot of those questions are actually, they corroborate back to life statements. So you can use those. Yeah. Or simple reflection, if for those of you who are in the habit of journaling or writing a diary, a lot of life statements are very visible in a diary. So that's something you can look at.
You yourself write in
Yeah, we don't write it consciously, but the unconscious brings it up when you journal typically. A very simple way, and it often works for me, is to ask people who are very close to me in terms of either work or personally, ask them about where do you think I'm getting stuck, and in that conversation the life sentence emerges. A lot of times life sentences are very visible to outsiders. It's not so visible to us.
the language they use.
Yeah. So it really helps to talk to people to dig out your own life statements. So what do we do with these, right, having dug them out? Of course, start with figuring out what is a predominant life statement. So as an example, I could talk about something that in a way I'm still working with, not completely overcome, but something that started off very early in life. I've had this life statement for years together, saying I can't handle numbers. Okay. Started off way back in school, where the school math teacher was not quite good, so I used to be sent to this tuition tutor lady who used to teach, and she used to be this extremely strict looking lady, and she would actually stand in class with a ruler in her hand and be ready to hit anybody who's making a mistake. And for some reason I used to always be terrified of her. I mean, just the look of her, even before having experienced her as a tutor, I was just generally very terrified of her. So I remember the first few classes when I went, I used to take my time to solve things, and in schools, of course, calculators wouldn't be allowed, so you would manually calculate and all of that. And typically the student who completes a problem first or second would be told that he or she is good, and I would typically not be the first or second to complete, and therefore it was kind of resigned that, yeah, I mean, this is the one that always takes time, right? And in the process, somewhere in my head, I resigned and said, not for me, maths is not for me, right? To an extent where no amount of proof that came my way in life wouldn't impact the life statement. I remember in 10th grade, I got 99% in maths. 12th, I had 98% in math, and the belief continued that I cannot handle numbers.
After dating also.
Yeah, nothing would change that belief. It was so. What happens with a life sentence is that because it's so deep, no amount of proof, no amount of factual reinforcement against it can overturn it unless I choose to work with it, right? So when 10th grade happened, when 12th grade happened, my explanation was that, oh, maybe I got it by fluke, maybe the exam was very easy, right? So it didn't matter, right? So therefore, a lot of my life choices, my career choices happened in a way that I avoid numbers, right? Which, looking back, I mean, it turned out well for me, but looking back, it could have been a very crucial determiner of how my life could have gone, right? So when did it get formed? It formed way back when I was in school, perhaps early teens, right? How does it work for me today? How does this statement that I can't handle numbers work for me today? I try and postpone every possible thing that has to do with numbers, taxes, accounting, simple cash expenses at work, making a petty cash list. I try and avoid anything to do with numbers as much as I can. There are projects that I turn down or give away to somebody else which involve too much analytics or statistics because I don't want to work with it, right? So how does it work for me? Not very efficient, right? Because I end up postponing a lot of things. I end up delegating a lot of things which I actually can do very easily, but I don't end up owning it up. So how does it serve me? Well, there is a emotional comfort zone about not wanting to deal with numbers and therefore outsourcing it as easily and quickly as I can. And in some ways, it's almost a retaliation against that life statement, saying that, yeah, I know life statement you exist, but see, I found a workaround, so I don't have to deal with you. So, you know, my accountant handles my numbers or somebody else handles my numbers, and therefore I found a workaround you, and therefore I don't have to deal with you. Right? It's almost a retaliation statement that happens. Does it serve me? Well, not quite. I mean, it's not particularly productive. So therefore, what's absent for me as a result of holding on to this life sentence? In simple terms, a lot of efficiency, a lot of things that could be done quicker do not get done quickly because I wait to delegate, I wait to outsource all the number work to somebody else. Right? And in that process, it is extremely inefficient, and therefore what's absent for me is, one, of course, efficiency. Two, I suppose a lot of opportunities are absent because I don't even look at projects which involve too much numbers. Right? So that I could be giving up a lot potentially just because I hold on to this life statement. So that's a simple process that all of us can follow about any life statement that we have. So we start off with naming the life sentence as is, and that by itself is a very powerful process. Just giving it a name, stating it as such, takes a lot of the power back into us. Right? And then we talk about when did it get formed. It really helps to look at the origin of it, because then we can work with that story. Right? So when I know that it started with that math tutor, I can go back and work to transform that statement there. Right? And then, of course, evaluate how does it serve me, what are the advantages of holding on to the statement, how does it not serve me, what are the disadvantages of it, what am I giving up to hold this life sentence. Right? So you start off with that process of accessing it and starting to work with it. And finally, look at what are different ways to overcome it. One way is to look at a simple journaling exercise. It could also be a simple internal reflective exercise if you don't like to write. Look at the relevance of the sentence in my current context. Right? So if I have to very objectively look at where I am in life today and then look at the statement saying I cannot handle numbers, and look at the reality of it. Is it really true I cannot handle numbers? Do I not handle numbers at all in my life? No, I do. I deal with a lot of Excel sheets, I do financial calculations at business, I do a whole lot of other regular number things that we all do in terms of cash and other transactions or financial planning. Right? So can I not handle numbers? No, that's not true. I can handle numbers. Right? So that's busted to a certain extent here in the context of my current life. Then we go back to the story and look at, is this life sentence really true? Okay. Now, if I have to go back to my story of the math tutor, right, and look at the incident and the meaning I gave to that incident. Right. The incident was that, okay, I was probably not the first to finish problems. In the process, I was never appreciated by that tutor. Does it mean she specifically gave a note saying this girl is not good for math? No, she didn't do that. She just ignored me. Right? The meaning I made of it as a child was I'm not good at math. Right? And that meaning was made in a moment of vulnerability where there was a lot of pressure that you have to stand first or second in class and you're not standing first or second because of math, so you have to do well, and there's a whole lot of pressure around it. And therefore, in that moment of vulnerability, I took in that statement saying this is not for me. Right? And therefore, is that meaning really true? No, the meaning I made is not true. It's just my meaning. Right? It wasn't reality in the sense that it wasn't an incident. It is not something that can be corroborated by fact. There was nothing specific that the math tutor told me. Right? My scores in my exams don't corroborate the statement, and therefore, is it true? No, it's not true. Right? And if I have to look at it From today's context, purely logically, no, it's not. The statement is not quite true. In serving the life sentence, am I honoring my values? So one value that I hold really dear, and I've held it all through my life, is the whole idea of learning and growth, and that's been very important for me. In holding this life statement that I am not good at math, am I living according to my values? No, I'm actually in contradiction to my values, because in saying I can't handle it, I'm not allowing myself to learn. Right? I've already resigned to the fact that there's nothing I can learn in accounting. I can't learn bookkeeping, I can't learn finance, because I'm not good at numbers. So in a way, I'm actually contradicting my own values. There is an inner conflict that's happening there. Is it meeting my needs? No, it's not meeting any needs whatsoever. Right? Even if I were to talk of a simple need of growth, learning, self-respect, no, it's not meeting any of those needs. So then, what do I want to create now? Okay. So in my case, and here is this is a personal process in the sense it needs to be believable for you. For me, it was not very believable to create a possibility that, all right, I will start handling all my accounts myself. I mean, that was too huge for me to go from this life statement to there, right? So for me, the only possibility I wanted to create was to delegate, of course, is an option that's there, but the possibility I wanted to create was to simply stop labeling myself as not good in numbers, can't handle numbers, and at least open up to projects which involve numbers. Right? I mean, and that's believable for me, that's doable for me. Right? For another person, perhaps it would be very believable to say, I'm going to take charge of my accounts and start handling it myself. For me, it sounded a little too much. My body wouldn't accept it. Right? So the possibility is a personal choice. You look at how slowly or fast you want to move there. And then, of course, it is important to have some kind of an actionable statement, a statement of commitment, to look at how do I very tangibly release the life sentence. And that tangibility is important because ultimately all life sentences, like all beliefs and memories, are stored in physical memory, right? And for our cells to release that memory, to release that life statement, we need to do something that counters it so that the memory gets replaced, right? So in my case, what I decided to commit to was to actively start, till the time a relevant project comes in, to actively start looking at my financial statements every week and not wait for the accountant to come at the end of the month. So whatever little adjustments I need to make, I start making it by myself without quite waiting for another person to come and handle that sheet. And in the process, at least let my body know that, okay, I've started, I'm releasing the statement and I'm handling those numbers. As I sit with that sheet every week, I am handling numbers and I'm handling it quite okay. Right? So like that, whatever physical commitment statement that you can make in terms of an actual actionable becomes very important to seal the process. Otherwise, what we are doing till here is a mental process. However, the memory of the life sentence is a very physical memory, so it becomes important to actually make it a somatic experience and release it through the body. So there needs to be some physical tangible action that you do, and the tangible action could be a conversation, it could be writing something, reading something, go and doing something, whatever it is, but it needs to be executed by the body for it to be believable at the cellular level. And in that process, the memory shift. The reason I said I'm still working with this life sentence is because I'm still looking to challenge myself with that really big numerical project, which hasn't quite come my way yet. So I'm still being very conscious of the life sentence and the way it operates. Perhaps the moment I handle something big in terms of numbers, the statement will completely drop. And then it will be replaced with a newer statement that says, okay, I can handle it. Right? So the idea is not so much to go from one life sentence to the opposite of it. I don't have to go from saying I can't handle numbers to I'm great at numbers. So long as I can drop the limitation that it creates, it's good enough, right? And in that process, the cage opens. And that's the whole point of working with life statements, just open the cage that we've built around ourselves with a whole lot of these statements that we live with. So simple process, having accessed the life statement, we look at the relevance of the statement now. Today, with my skill and knowledge and wisdom and experience, how true is it? Go back to that life story and talk about, did I make meaning and form this life sentence, or was it something that was really true? And most cases it can't be really true. It's meaning that we've made out of that situation, right? And then look at, am I in contradiction with my needs, with my values? And in most cases we will be. So what do I want to create now? And then look at how do we create it? What is the action that we commit to?